Okay, so now we're looking at the Alter Shulchan Aruch that discusses these laws, which we just finished discussing in the Gemara, which is the prohibition against eating meal before on Erev Pesach. On Erev Pesach. The prohibition against eating to make sure you have an appetite. Now, the discussion we just finished in the Gemara, which gave us different views and also different practices based on people's personality types and their constitutions and what opens their appetite and what doesn't. But there's an issue that nobody noticed that we have to think about as we get to the Shulchan Aruch, and this is something that the commentary is discussing. It's now going to be synthesized in the Alter Shulchan Aruch, which is you're allowed to eat snacks, right? But you're not allowed to eat
a meal,
bread or meal. You're not allowed to eat bread anyway, Pesach afternoon. It's chametz. The prohibition of chametz starts well before
bread, meaning a meal, meaning
the Pesach. There's our question. You may not eat bread anyway on Erev Pesach,
right?
Because the prohibition against eating chametz starts when your Pesach offering obligation starts. Seder says, you shouldn't slaughter your Pesach offering while you still have bread in your house. So the prohibition of chametz starts earlier in the day. So then what meal are we talking about you're not allowed to eat? A matzah meal, presumably. Well, you're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach either.
Right, exactly.
You're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach anyway. So what can you have? You're anyways not eating a meal.
Kind of chametz, you can have matzah.
So what are we talking about?
Yeah, rich matzah, right?
That's the rich matzah.
That's
matzah shita.
That's not used for the Pesach.
That's right. The matzah shita. So this whole prohibition that we're making ourselves,
right,
learning about and trying to understand is all a question of eating egg matzah. Because what pure matzah you can't have anyway because it's Erev Pesach, and bread you can't have anyway because it's also Erev Pesach. Either way you can't. But nonetheless, this whole law still matters. See, this is one of those cases where the halacha has an ideal, even if in practice, the practice is very slippery. We've had this before. Like, for example, the last example we had of this is where the halacha has this ideal that you bench in the place where you ate.
Right.
You don't walk around eating. You sit down, you finish, and you make your after bracha. Now, the end was that when we got to the halachas, in reality, you pretty much, it's very rare that you're yanked back to your spot you end up because to begin with you intended to leave because you're walking around anyway, whatever the reasons are, right? So there's an ideal the halacha has for you, but in reality, the Gemara, the halacha cuts it up so much that you end up maybe have all kinds of leniencies on the way out. But the halacha still has an idea of what it wants from you. And very similar here. The idea the halacha is trying to convey is make sure you have an appetite for the Seder. Now, in reality, this prohibition against eating so that you can have an appetite may barely apply because you anyways are not eating bread, you're not allowed to. You're anyways not eating matzah, you're not allowed to. It's only a question of eating those, right? But still, the idea of the halacha that you have to have an appetite is still relevant. Because let's say you can get away with eating lots of meat at a Pesach, lots of chicken. Okay, you not eat meat because you have to eat Pesach that night, but you're eating lots of chicken. I didn't do any prohibition, but now you're stuffed when you come to the Seder. So even if you didn't technically violate any prohibition, you violated the point of the halacha. Right. So there's two components to every halacha. What's the objective, and then what's the practice of it? The objective remains even if the practice gets narrowed. Right. So the objective of the halacha is make sure you have an appetite, as is evident from the Gemara. One guy fasted, one guy had a lot of wine. They all did their different things to get their appetite going. Or one guy had snacks, whatever it was. Right. Even if the prohibition, as it's defined in the technical application, is very narrow, the idea trying to be conveyed to us still remains. And that's going to become clear as we learn the Shulchan Aruch now. Following? So let's begin, at least a little bit. So I'm reading in the Hebrew, but you can follow along in English. Siman Tov Ein Aleph, chapter or section 471. And the title of the section is Erev Pesach on Erev Pesach, Achar Shoah Sidus, after the 10th hour, starting from sunrise, Aser Lechal Pas, it's forbidden to eat bread. Ubo Yudalat Sifim. And in this section, there will be 14 subsections. So Aleph, Halacha 1. Call Adam, every person. Af she'ena istinus, even if he's not such a delicate person. He's not so delicate, he doesn't have such an extremely, particular constitution. He's your average person. Asla lechal pas, is forbidden for him to eat bread. Now, what would bread be now? as we said earlier, you can't eat actual bread because you're not allowed to own chametz now. You cannot eat actual matzah because you're not allowed to eat actual matzah on Erev Pesach before the Seder night. Namely, the hainu matzah shira, the rich matzah. K'moshi is bar. We'll explain soon in subsection 4 what rich matzah is.
And the pile, is that what we do?
That's correct, yes.
Wow.
That's right. This is the pile what we do. We do even more, we'll see. Okay. Mitchila Shah Sidis, from the beginning of the 10th hour, Be'erev Pesach, on the evening of Pesach, ad halayla, until the night. Okay, what does it say for those 3? Okay, I always thought it was 9.5 hours. Why are we getting to 10th hour? Oh, beginning of the 10th hour would actually be at 9 hours.
Right.
So it's half an hour earlier than what I've been saying. I was saying 9.5 hours. He's saying at 9 hours.
It's the previous day, right?
No, it's Erev Pesach.
After the 10th hour on the day before. Oh, okay.
Day before Pesach means Erev Pesach.
Yeah.
But the beginning of the beginning of 10th hours is 9 hours after sunrise. It's actually half an hour earlier from what we've been saying until now.
It's like your birthday. Like if you're 36, you're in your
37th year. So it's not 10th hour actually means 9 hours after the day. So if we're going from our 6 model, it'll be 3.
So we're not. It wasn't 9.5. It was 10.
I perhaps it's for the same reason. You don't know exactly when it is, so you start early. Perhaps it's for the same reason because the commentaries in the Shulchan Aruch go out at least. Mom says 9.5 hours.
I still get mixed up between the day because what I learned is day is from Gemara, after Mara.
Yes,
So the 10th after Gemara.
10th hour after morning, which it means here. Because the halacha is you divide the 20.
We're not talking about Mara.
No, 10 hours after sunrise. You divide the halacha. You divide the 24 hours into 2 and each into 12. From sunrise, sunset, sunrise, in 12
We
hours.
stopped eating at 11 o'clock.
Stopped eating chametz.
Yeah.
Here we're talking about kosher for Passover bread,
Yeah.
but not matzah. It's rich matzah, which we'll explain soon what it is.
Mm.
Okay, and the reason is kedei sheyecha matzah b'layla, so that you eat matzah in the evening, l'tayavim, with an appetite. So therefore, make sure you're not full. Therefore, no eating bread at this hour, even the bread that's kosher for Passover.
Yeah.
Right, that's the point. Bread that's kosher for Passover, which is not actual kosher matzah, rich matzah. Ubein shuhayim arach, whether it's a long day and you have a long time till the Pesach Seder.
Yeah.
Right, if it right, Bein shayim kotzer, whether it's a short day. La'olam aser la'lecho mitchilas reviya yoyim ha'achron ad halayla. It's always forbidden to eat from the last quarter of the day until you come to your matzah.
That was
To your
the
Seder.
opinion of the Agrippa's case, right?
That was the proof. That was the proof case, but it's the straight understanding of the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Even to start eating before the 10th hour, so before 3 o'clock in the afternoon, if we're doing our 6 to 6 model, it's also forbidden. If I know if you know your meal is going to continue into that hour when it's prohibited, that is taken from Agrippas, right? Because Agrippas' meal was earlier, and yet the Gemara said even Agrippas, who starts his meal at the 9th hour, has to stop eating, even though it's before the time that's prohibited. Nonetheless, because his meal is going to extend, it's prohibited. Okay, so we'll stop over here. But this is where we are right now. This is the essential halacha, and we added this new detail. This is what we learned so far. That's new. We didn't know from the Gemara that the prohibition against eating bread is only kosher Pesach bread, because regular bread is anyways forbidden. Matzah is anyways forbidden. It's kosher Pesach bread, i.e., rich matzah. That's where the prohibition stands. And we also learned that it starts at the beginning of the 9th hour, beginning of the 10th hour, which is 9 hours after the day rises. And as we learned from Agrippas, even if you're starting earlier, but the meal is going to continue later, also prohibited. Yeah. And then finally, it doesn't make a difference how long your day is. Meaning some years, the last quarter of the day could be an hour and a half on our clock, and other depending where you are in the world, it could be the last quarter of the day could be 5 hours, not 5 hours, but 3.5 hours, certainly 4 hours. Makes a difference. It's universal. Last quarter of the day, no eating, make sure you have an appetite. Okay. More details, God willing, tomorrow.
I wonder if we're going to get into this. thought came in my head about, is prohibition against eating a meal or is prohibition against eating bread?
Meal in halacha is defined as bread, always.
Because I think that rich matzah is really mezonot, right? Not, you don't have to.
Okay, we'll get it. Maybe we'll get it. Okay, we'll get into it maybe.
Therefore, it would be a snack.
We'll get into it maybe. But yeah, meal equals bread in halacha. Always, meal equals bread. Otherwise, it's
But
called
bread
snack.
does not necessarily equal meat.
Mezonah's bread may not equal a meal, but it could
Right,
equal a meal.
which I
Okay,
think-
maybe we'll get to that. Yeah. Okay, wonderful day.